Every year, we all file our taxes. It's just a part of life. But what if I told you that our entire income tax system was never supposed to be permanent? That it started as a temporary fix for a crisis and just never went away? Today, we're diving into the wild origin story of Canadian taxes. Seriously, just think about that for a second. What if that chunk of money that comes off your paycheck was only meant to be a short-term thing? Well, it turns out that's exactly what happened. This is the story of the temporary tax that became a permanent pillar of Canadian society. All right, to really get this, we've got to rewind the clock. Way back, we're going to a time before income tax was even a concept in Canada. Imagine a world where the government ran the country without ever touching a dollar of your personal income. Look, taxes are nothing new, right? They've been around pretty much forever. Rulers always needed to collect from the people to pay for things. But for most of history, it wasn't about cash. People paid with what they had, with what they produced, a portion of their grain, some of their livestock, whatever. It was a tax on what you made, not what you earned. And that's pretty much how things were when Canada was formed. Okay, let's jump forward to 1867. Canada is born. The brand new federal government has a massive to-do list. We're talking building railways, digging harbors, basically connecting this huge new country. And to pay for all that, it needed the power to raise money. In other words, it needed to tax. But for the first 50 years, the government's playbook was super simple. They relied on two main things: customs duties, which are taxes on stuff coming into or leaving the country, and excise taxes, which were special taxes on things made right here in Canada, like booze and tobacco. But your personal income? Totally off limits. For half a century, that system of just taxing goods worked pretty well. But then a massive global conflict kicked off that would completely flip the script on Canada's finances, forever. In 1914, Canada, as part of the British Empire, found itself in the First World War. And let me tell you, financing a modern war was unbelievably expensive. The old system of taxing goods just couldn't cover the staggering, mind-boggling costs. Not even close. So the government needed cash, and it needed it fast. In 1916, it dipped its toes in the water with something new, the Business Profits War Tax Act. It was exactly what it sounds like, a temporary tax aimed right at businesses to help pay for the war. And this was a sign of things to come. But even taxing businesses wasn't enough. The war kept raging, the bills kept piling up, and the government realized it had to do something radical. It had to introduce a new idea, one it promised would only be temporary. Okay, remember this year, 1917. This is the moment everything changes for pretty much every single Canadian taxpayer from then on. This is when the government rolled out the Income War Tax Act. And this was the big one. For the very first time, they weren't just taxing companies, they were putting a tax on personal income, your income. All that money was meant to go directly to the war effort, paying for machines, transport, you name it. But here is the kicker, the single most important detail in this whole story. This tax was explicitly sold to Canadians as a temporary measure. The government's line was, "Don't worry, we'll take another look at this whole thing once the war is over." It was never, ever supposed to be permanent. So you can see how this all snowballed, right? You start with a country funded by taxing goods. Then a war creates this huge financial black hole. So in 1917, they bring in a temporary income tax. A few years later, in 1920, they add another temporary sales tax to cover costs like veterans' pensions. You can kind of see a pattern forming here, can't you? So how in the world did this temporary fix become a permanent fixture of Canadian life? Well, the war ended, but the tax didn't. The government had stumbled upon an incredibly powerful new way to make money, and it wasn't about to turn off the tap. A really key move happened in 1943 with the pay-as-you-earn system. This was pretty genius, actually. Your employer would now deduct the tax right from your paycheck before you even got it. Suddenly, income tax wasn't a big, painful check you had to write. It just disappeared. It became a normal, unavoidable part of having a job. And then came the final nail in the temporary coffin. In 1948, the government replaced the original Income War Tax Act with the brand new Income Tax Act. And just like that, it was official. 30 years after it was brought in just for the war, federal income tax was here to stay, for good. And to give you a sense of just how much things have changed, get this. The original act from 1917,
It was only 10 pages long. Super simple, super straightforward, for what was supposed to be a simple temporary purpose.
Now, compare that to the Income Tax Act we have today. It is an absolute behemoth, over 3,000 pages long. I mean, this picture says it all. We went from a short, temporary emergency measure to one of the most complicated laws in the entire country.
So income tax was here for good, but the system's evolution didn't stop there. Oh no, the next major change brings us right into the modern era, and it's something we all see on our receipts every single day.
In 1991, the government decided to shake things up again. It got rid of the old federal sales tax and brought in the GST, the Goods and Services Tax. Now, to help out lower-income families, they also created the GST credit. Then, a little later, a bunch of provinces decided to simplify things by just merging their own sales tax with the GST to create the HST, the harmonized sales tax we know so well. So when you boil it all down, our entire modern tax system, this huge part of our lives, it all grew out of an emergency plan that was never meant to last. It was shaped by a crisis more than 100 years ago. And that really leaves us with one big question. What crisis or what opportunity is going to shape it next?